All right, let's talk about one of the most significant and, one of the most polarizing new voices in fiction today, Gretchen Felker-Martin. Her career is just fascinating because it's built on this wild contradiction. She's been called a genius by some and then literally canceled by a corporate giant, almost in the same breath. I mean, just look at this. On the one hand, you have the literary elite calling her work a modern horror masterpiece. But on the other hand, a massive company like DC Comics drops her just one single day after her debut issue comes out. So how on earth does an artist end up in both of these places at the exact same time? And that really gets us to the core question we're tackling here. Who is Gretchen Felker-Martin? What is it about her work that's so powerful it can inspire this incredible, fierce loyalty from fans and at the same time genuine fear from a corporation? Let's dig in. To really get her writing, you kind of have to get inside her head. Her whole creative philosophy, it really boils down to two big ideas: knowing exactly who your audience is and treating writing not like some magical act, but like a job. So, first, her purpose. It is crystal clear and completely unapologetic. She says, when I'm writing, it's for queers, always. She's not trying to make trans life more palatable for a mainstream audience. Nope. Her goal is to show the messy, real human side of her community back to them so they feel seen. And the second piece is this incredibly pragmatic, almost blue-collar approach she has to actually writing. She totally rejects that romantic idea of waiting for inspiration to strike. For her, writing is a job. It's a craft. You show up, you punch the clock, and you do the work day in and day out. And this right here perfectly sums it up. She straight up doesn't believe in writer's block. Her whole argument is that if you just sit around waiting until you feel like writing, you're never going to finish anything. The most important thing is just getting the words on the page, because actually finishing the project is the only thing that really matters. So let's see how this philosophy actually comes to life. We're going to look at her breakout novel, Manhunt. It is the perfect case study for her style, her politics, and the themes she really cares about. Okay, the premise is deliberately provocative. A plague hits that turns anyone with a high level of testosterone into a feral, flesh-eating monster. So, to survive, our main characters, two trans women named Beth and Fran, have to actually hunt these men down and harvest their organs to make the estrogen they need. And if that wasn't enough, they're not just fighting monsters, they're also dealing with violent factions of TERFs, or trans-exclusionary radical feminists. But here's what's so fascinating. For all of that blood and guts and brutality, the actual heart of the novel is about connection. This quote really gets to the core of it all. It's about the power of found family, of the queer community holding on to each other in a world that's trying to rip them apart. And that's the central push and pull of the book, right? The extreme, really graphic horror isn't just there for shock value. It's all in service of a deeply human story about what it takes to build a community, to find love and tenderness even when the world is literally ending. This leads us right into her signature style. Felker-Martin's use of this unflinching, super graphic horror is one of the most recognizable things about her work. And as it turns out, it comes from a place that's incredibly personal. So her style fits into a couple of horror subgenres. First, you've got splatterpunk, which is, well, it's exactly what it sounds like, a focus on really explicit gore. Then there's Cronenbergian body horror. Think of the director David Cronenberg, which is all about these grotesque, disturbing bodily transformations. And she's very open about her influences, calling horror legends Stephen King and Clive Barker her two horror dads. But this style isn't just about paying tribute to her influences. It's not just for shock value. It is deeply, deeply rooted in her personal life. This intense focus on the body, on its failings and transformations, is a direct result of her own lived experience with body dysmorphic disorder. So BDD is a condition that causes this obsessive fixation on what a person perceives as flaws in their own appearance. For Felker-Martin, she says this has created an intense, inescapable revulsion that she has to live with every single day. So the body horror you read in her books, it becomes a way for her to take that internal psychological pain and make it external. The gore becomes a powerful metaphor for a very real, very chronic condition. So this deeply personal, absolutely unflinching style is what's earned her such a loyal, passionate fan base, but it's also a huge part of what makes her such a lightning rod for controversy. Which brings us back to that contradiction we started with. Her career is just defined by these incredible peaks of acclaim and these sharp valleys of public conflict. I mean, this timeline really gives you whiplash. In 2022, Manhunt is named the #1 book of the year by Vulture. 2 years later, her next novel hits the bestseller list and she gets a TV deal with a legendary director, Lily Wachowski. Then, bam, in 2025, her dream job writing a comic for DC gets canceled one day after it comes out. That is a wild series of highs and lows in a very, very short amount of time. So what happened there? Well, the cancellation was all about her social media. From her point of view, DC hired her because they wanted her transgressive cachet, her edgy brand. But then they cut and ran the second it became a PR headache for them. She stood by her online comments, saying she had no regrets. From DC's side, they stated that posts promoting hostility were simply inconsistent with DC's standards of conduct and that any promotion of harm was unacceptable. And what this whole thing really boils down to is this fundamental tension, right? On one side, you have this transgressive artist whose politics are completely intertwined with her work and her public persona. And on the other side, you've got a giant corporation whose #1 priority has to be managing risk and protecting its brand. When those two things smash into each other, something's got to give. All of this brings us right back to the core of who Gretchen Felker-Martin really is as an artist. Her entire career, her whole identity, it's really built on this idea of refusal. And you can hear it right here in her advice for other marginalized writers. Write exactly what you want, be exactly who you are. It is this defiant call to action, telling people to just ignore the haters and create work that is personal and weird and completely true to yourself, no matter what the consequences might be. And that's really her legacy in a nutshell. It's a refusal to assimilate, a refusal to water down her politics to make people comfortable, and a refusal to sanitize her art so it's safe for a big corporation. She always prioritizes her message and her community over everything else. Which leaves us with one final big question to think about. In the world we live in now, one that's so often dominated by corporate brands and super sanitized, safe content, what is the role and maybe what is the future of the truly transgressive artist?